Imagine sitting on a plane with 180 passengers, when suddenly you realize the entire flight has been sabotaged, not by a terrorist, not by a stranger, but by the president of your own neighborhood HOA. What happened next became the downfall of her empire, 30,000 feet in the air. I lived through a travel nightmare that I wouldn't wish on anyone, though it's the kind of story you'd expect to hear whispered in an airport lounge. A woman I knew, someone who has tormented my neighborhood for years, decided she was entitled to my first-class seat. She even faked a medical excuse to justify her demand. But what started as a petty power play ended with her earning a lifetime ban from the airline. Let me rewind and set the scene properly. My name is Evan Cross, and I'm a commercial airline pilot. Flying planes is more than just a career, it's a discipline. The job demands two things above all else: a calm mind and a sharp eye for details. When you're responsible for nearly 200 lives cruising at 37,000 feet, distractions can be deadly. You learn to hear beyond the noise. The steady hum of engines, the flicker of an amber light, the faint shift of cabin pressure. Every tiny change whispers a story, and my instinct is trained to listen. Usually, a pilot's day is long stretches of routine punctuated by brief, razor-focused moments that matter more than anything else. But today, the turbulence wasn't in the cockpit. It started before we ever left the ground at Gate C12. And the source of that storm had a name: Karen Lane. Back in my neighborhood, Karen is the self-proclaimed monarch of our HOA. She rules our block with the bylaws clutched like a scepter, enforcing them with all the warmth of a medieval executioner. But at the airport, stripped of her HOA title, she was just another entitled passenger itching to throw her weight around. That day, I wasn't in uniform. I was deadheading, riding as a passenger so I could position for my next assignment. I wore a red polo, jeans, and sneakers. No captain's stripes, no wings pinned to my chest, nothing to suggest I was crew. My boarding pass said Seat 2A in first class, a small perk of the job. So there I was, just another traveler scrolling headlines on my phone, when I heard a voice that made my stomach sink. Imagine gravel run through a blender, that's what her tone sounded like. "I don't think you understand," Karen drawled to the gate agent, her words dripping with condescension. "I am a platinum medallion member. I booked a first-class ticket. Seat 2A is my preferred seat. Clearly, there's been a mistake." The gate agent, her name tag read Brenda, barely flinched. With the serene patience of someone who had probably seen 1,000 Karens before breakfast, she typed into her terminal. "Ma'am," she said evenly, "your reservation is for Seat 3B. Seat 2A is assigned to another passenger, and he's already checked in." Her voice was calm, practiced, unshakable. The kind of tone that wins quiet wars against pushy travelers. Karen, of course, wasn't used to hearing no. She leaned over the counter, practically breathing down Brenda's neck. "Then unassign him. I have status. This is unacceptable. I need that seat for medical reasons. Legroom." I looked down at my own 6'2" frame and nearly laughed. Legroom, sure. But I don't weaponize my height as an excuse. Karen, barely 5'4" in her overly assertive walking shoes, was playing the oldest entitled trick in the book. Brenda gave the polite but immovable smile of a seasoned airline professional. "I'm sorry, ma'am. This flight is full. I cannot move another passenger without their consent. Seat 3B also offers extra legroom." Of course, that was a lie. 3B was decent, but it wasn't 2A. Karen's face tightened. Her hair, perfectly coiffed into suburban battle armor, seemed to bristle as her frustration boiled. "This is ridiculous. I pay thousands of dollars to this airline. Get me your supervisor now." I sighed, pocketed my phone, and prepared for the show. Just then, my phone buzzed. It was Lena, my wife. Her text read, "You won't believe this. HOA emergency vote tonight. Guess who's pushing it? Karen." I smirked and tapped back. "Funny you should mention her. She's trying to steal my seat at the gate." Lena's reply came instantly. The exploding head emoji. Perfect. Back at the counter, Brenda calmly radioed her supervisor. Minutes later, he arrived. A tired-looking man who radiated authority. Predictably, the entire argument played out again like a bad rerun. Karen escalated, her voice rising as she gestured wildly. By now, curious travelers had stopped pretending not to stare. The supervisor finally laid down the law. "Ma'am, the seat is taken. Your options are to sit in your assigned seat, 3B, or be rebooked on the next flight, tomorrow." Checkmate. Then came the quiet kill shot. Brenda lifted her radio and spoke, her voice steady. "Escort the pilot. Pre-board at C-12. Keep the lane clear." The words weren't loud, but the ripple they caused was instant. Heads turned. Curious eyes swept the waiting area. I kept mine locked on my phone, playing it cool. Karen's face flushed crimson. Snatching her 3B boarding pass from the counter, she scanned the waiting area until her glare landed on me. I didn't flinch. I met her stare with a calm, neutral expression. To her, I was just some anonymous guy in a polo shirt who had taken what she thought was hers. But I knew that look. The HOA glare. It was the same one she gave my neighbor Mike when his roses dared to grow an inch past regulation height. Her eyes all but promised retaliation. When boarding was called, I held back, letting the other first-class passengers go ahead. I had already waved off pre-board. I didn't need the attention. As I walked down the jet bridge, I could feel her glare burning into my back. Settling into seat 2A, I stowed my bag overhead, buckled in, and pulled out a paperback thriller. No alcohol for me, not even while deadheading. I had a flight to command in under 12 hours. Just water, a book, and a quiet ride. Moments later, Karen stormed onto the plane like an avenging angel. She paused at my row, her gaze darting from the 2A placard to my face. Her lips curled into a sniff of disdain before she shuffled into her seat in 3B, just behind me across the aisle. Of course, she made a whole production of it. Loud sighs, exaggerated fumbling as she crammed her oversized bag beneath the seat. That's when my pilot's instinct kicked in. The quiet inner whisper that says, "Pay attention." This wasn't just about a seat. Karen was the type who couldn't stand losing. And when entitled people feel cornered, they look for other ways to bend or break the rules. And as it turned out, her tantrum at the gate was only the opening act. The real drama was about to play out thousands of feet in the air. You see, being a pilot trains you to study people. Spend enough hours sealed in a flying tube with strangers, and you start to recognize patterns. Nervous flyers gripping the armrests. Road warriors asleep before takeoff. Families juggling kids and chaos. But you also notice the outliers, the people who don't quite fit the script. Like the man who boarded last. He wore a shiny, too-perfect suit, hair slicked back with the kind of effort that screams vanity. His shoes gleamed like mirrors, and on his pinky sat a gold signet ring so massive it could double as a paperweight. His ticket wasn't for first class, but he lingered near the front galley anyway. Phone pressed to his ear, voice a low, agitated murmur. He paced tight circles right near the cockpit door, a little too close for comfort. Flight attendant Sarah, young and focused, was stowing crew bags in the narrow closet just a step away. Her back was turned when the man suddenly stepped backward, colliding with her hard enough to make her stumble. "Oh, my apologies. So sorry," he said smoothly, his voice oozing charm. He reached to steady her. His movements were fluid, almost rehearsed. But my eyes caught something hers didn't. His ringed hand brushed dangerously close to the open zipper of her personal tote bag, resting on top of the crew luggage. And my gut told me this was no accident. It happened in the blink of an eye. Barely 2 seconds, maybe less. His jeweled hand dipped toward Sarah's open tote in a swift, practiced motion, then retreated just as quickly. By the time she turned, he was smiling, all teeth and artifice. "Terribly sorry about that," he said smoothly, his voice as slick as his hair. "This call has me all worked up." Sarah, caught off guard but trying to remain professional, nodded. "It's all right, sir. No problem." The man ended his call with a sharp, dismissive, "It's handled." Then he strolled toward the economy cabin, vanishing into the crowd like a magician exiting stage left. To anyone else, it was nothing. A clumsy businessman, distracted by an urgent phone call. The perfect little play. No one would have thought twice. But I did. Because noticing the things others miss is my job. And that bump hadn't been clumsy, it had been choreographed. The way he shielded his movements with his body. The way his hand landed directly on that bag. The calculated precision of it. That wasn't an accident. It was a plant. And suddenly, my wife's earlier text replayed in my head. Karen's pushing through an emergency vote tonight. She'd followed up with details. A slick developer had been buying up foreclosed homes in our neighborhood, hoping to ram through a massive high-density apartment project. It would choke our quiet streets with traffic and gut our property values. He needed one final zoning variance to make it official, an approval from the HOA. Most residents were against it, but Karen, our self-appointed queen, was his loudest champion. If she could rush an emergency vote while half the neighborhood was out on vacation, she could hand him everything he wanted. And sitting in this cabin, I realized the truth. The developer wasn't just a name in Lena's texts. He was here. The polished predator with the oversized gold ring fit the description perfectly. Slick, overconfident, and moving like a man who always gets his way. I shifted my gaze to seat 3B. Karen was hunched over her phone, thumbs flying, a smug smile tugging at her lips. She wasn't just angry about losing her seat anymore. She was waiting for something, expecting something, and the timing was too neat to ignore. The man with the ring, the planted bag, Karen smirking like she had already won. They were connected. This wasn't coincidence, it was orchestration. I didn't know what had been slipped into that bag, but it wasn't candy or magazines. My training screamed at me, don't react, don't tip your hand, just observe. So I did. I logged every detail, the name tag on the flight attendant, the exact time of the accident, the position of the tote when she later slid it into the overhead bin above row 3. To anyone else, those were meaningless. But in an investigation, details are everything. The cabin door closed with a heavy thunk. Safety announcements began. Everything on the surface was normal. But I knew better. Somewhere on this aircraft was a foreign object, planted by a man who shouldn't have been in first class, tied to a woman who had spent years trying to bend the world to her will. The engine spooled, the aircraft pushed back, and as we taxied toward the runway, a knot coiled in my gut. This was no longer just a repositioning flight home. This was something darker. How far will a man go to defend his home? I was about to find out. The cruel irony was that my home, the thing I was trying to protect, was 30,000 feet below me, while the threat was locked in the cabin with me. The plane surged forward, engines roaring, then lifted into the sky. For the first hour, calm reigned. We leveled at cruising altitude. The seatbelt sign clicked off. Drink service began. I asked for water, no ice. Karen, across the aisle, ordered a mimosa. Then she did something that didn't surprise me in the least. She set her phone on the tray table and went live. I saw the tiny red light. She was broadcasting her own reality show, painting herself the victim once again, telling her band of HOA loyalists how she'd been denied her rightful seat. That was her specialty, the perpetual victim who was always the aggressor. My phone buzzed. Lena again. This time it was a radar screenshot. A wall of storms, an angry bruise stretching across our path. Bands of purple, red, and yellow screamed turbulence, lightning, and hail. Her text, looks nasty up there. Stay safe. I typed back, standard stuff. We'll route around it. But as I hit send, I glanced out the window. To the west, the horizon was already shifting. A deep, bruised gray rolling toward us. The captain's voice crackled overhead, calm but cautious. Folks, weather's building ahead. We'll try to find a smooth path, but please fasten your seatbelts. There may be some bumps. As if on cue, the cabin lights flickered once. Then again. A ripple of nervous gasps passed through the rows as the aircraft began to rattle. First like a car over gravel, then with heavier jolts. Flight attendants locked away their carts and strapped in. The mood shifted instantly. Easy chatter dissolved into stiff silence. I'd flown through far worse. Objectively, this was routine, but everything about it felt heavier. Every flicker, Every shudder of the airframe seemed to carry hidden weight. Then came the chime. The repeated, frantic press of a call button. It came from row 3B, from Karen. A flight attendant hurried over. "Ma'am, is everything all right?" Karen's voice rose, pitched with theatrical panic. "It's this man, he can't breathe. I think he's having a heart attack." I leaned forward, catching sight of her seatmate slumped against the window. His eyes closed, his skin pale. It looked convincing, but something about it smelled wrong. Too perfect, too convenient. Karen fanned him with the safety card, shrieking for a doctor while simultaneously holding her phone high, recording every angle. The crew leapt into action, calm and professional. They asked for medical personnel. A nurse from a few rows back rushed forward. Soon the man was lying in the aisle as the team worked with the emergency kit. But Karen kept inserting herself, blocking their movements, spewing wild diagnoses, narrating into her live feed. "This airline isn't prepared. This poor man is dying up here. And look at this turbulence. This is unsafe." The turbulence worsened, the plane lurching like a ship in rough seas. A sudden drop made passengers scream. The galley cart banged loose despite being secured, rolling forward with a metallic clatter. Karen never stopped filming. Then the captain's voice returned, steady but edged with urgency. "Ladies and gentlemen, due to a medical emergency and severe weather ahead, we are diverting to the nearest suitable airport. We'll be on the ground in 30 minutes. A low murmur spread through the cabin. Diversion. I opened the flight map on the seatback screen, my pulse quickening. Because deep down, I already knew. This medical emergency wasn't random. It was a move, a diversion, and Karen was orchestrating every beat of it. I already knew where we were headed. Within 30 minutes and able to handle an aircraft our size, there was only one major airport in range, our home field. The same airport Lena was 20 minutes from. The same field that would dump Karen Lane onto her driveway with just enough time to muscle an emergency HOA vote through that night. The pieces snapped together like a puzzle finally forced into place. The medical emergency was the pretext. The storm was the camouflage. The man with the ring had planted something in that bag. Not a harmless trinket, but leverage, a distraction, maybe worse. This flight, 200 souls and an entire crew, had become a weapon to deliver one entitled woman back to a meeting on time. My chest went cold. This wasn't petty greed now. This was criminal recklessness. They'd put everyone at risk for a zoning hearing. We began our descent into the teeth of the storm. Rain pelted the windows like handfuls of gravel. The cabin dimmed under the gray ceiling and the plane ate the air with a grinding, hungry sound. Turbulence kicked us hard. The kind that makes even seasoned travelers clutch armrests and whisper short prayers. The fuselage creaked, unsecured things rattled, and a chorus of anxious coughs filled the cabin. My senses sharpened. Pilots learn to read an aircraft like a language. Each creak, squeal, and thump has meaning. Some sounds are routine. Others are warnings. Then I heard something small, almost drowned by the engines and rain. A click. Not the confident, reassuring thunk of a bin locked properly, but a faint metallic give, the sound of a latch that hadn't fully seated. It came from an overhead compartment 2 rows ahead, opposite side. In calm air, a half-latched bin is an annoyance. In a storm, it can become a projectile launcher. I watched the seam of the bin door. When the next big bump hit, the door flexed a fraction and my eyes confirmed it. Not secure. I moved without drama. Panic is contagious on an aircraft. You never fuel it. I unbuckled, stayed low behind the seatbacks, and edged forward to the galley where the lead flight attendant, Maria, was braced in her jump seat. She looked up, alarm flickering across her trained face. "Sorry to bother you," I said quietly, keeping my voice down so it didn't rise above the din. Row 3, right side overhead. The latch. It didn't sound right when it closed. It might be loose. I didn't flash credentials or demand attention. I gave facts, clean, professional. Maria's pupils tightened. She understood immediately what a loose bin meant in this chop. She gave a sharp nod and unstrapped herself. With the practiced balance of someone who works on a moving platform, she walked to the bin and pushed. The door swung open far easier than it should. Maria's face drained. This wasn't a suitcase poking out of its shelf. It was Sarah's crew tote, the very bag the man with the signet ring had brushed. The same bag he'd accidentally touched. Maria didn't waste a breath. She slammed the door closed and this time engaged the latch until it snapped with a loud, decisive clack. Then she met my eyes, fear tempered by resolve. Her expression said what we both now knew. This was more than a misplaced bag. She went straight to the interphone and spoke in clipped, procedural phrases that masked the gravity of what she was relaying. I caught fragments. Possible device, forward overhead, following procedure. Her voice was code calm, terse, efficient. Level 2. The word hit my chest like an anvil. Level 2. A credible, unconfirmed threat. Not yet a detonation, but something that could become catastrophic if mishandled. My pulse thudded, but my head went clinical. This was a live scenario. We had to behave like we'd trained for it. The storm gave us another violent shudder. A service cart that had been lashed in the forward galley finally broke free, the locking mechanism surrendering to the turbulence. It surged down the aisle, a metal and plastic battering ram. A little boy had unbuckled to fetch a toy and was directly in its path. There isn't time for deliberation in that moment, only action. I exploded into the aisle, shoved my shoulder into the cart, and took the impact. Metal and plastic slammed into me, the force driving through bone. I heaved, pivoted, and jammed the cart sideways into the forward bulkhead, skidded to a halt. The kid was safe. The mother's half-sob, half-thank you washed over me as I scooped the boy back into his seat and cinched the belt. No heroics in the tone I used, just a clipped, rough reminder, stay put. My hands were ringing with the impact, but the flight attendants swarmed to secure the cart. Maria studied me with something like new respect and whispered, "Thank you." I only shrugged. "Part of the job," I said. "Which job?" It didn't matter. The people aboard were now my responsibility. The cockpit voice through the galley interphone was steady and authoritative. "Lock it down. No drama. Proceed per level 2. A seal closed. The reinforced flight deck door latched, and the plane became a sealed unit. No entry, no exit. Defensive now, prepared. Maria moved like a conductor, pulling the cabin crew into a single focused instrument. "Level 2 by the book," she said. "Move the item to the LRBL." She used the phrase without catching anyone's eye. It was grim shorthand for a grim plan, LRBL, least risk bomb location. On this airframe, it meant the rearmost service area on the right side. The strategy is brutal and precise. Isolate the threat against a fuselage panel meant to blow outward, minimizing damage to flight controls and the rest of the airplane. It's a choice among terrible options, executed only when the alternative is worse. Sarah's face went ashen. Her tote had been the source. Maria placed a steadying hand on her shoulder. "You did nothing wrong. Now we work." The crew moved with a quiet, urgent choreography. 2 attendants lifted Sarah's bag as if it were glass and carried it down the aisle toward the rear, steps measured and deliberate. As they passed, I caught sight of a passenger in 14C, the nondescript man in the gray jacket who'd barely reacted to the earlier chaos. He'd been calm through turbulence, unfazed by the runaway cart. Now his eyes tracked the tote like a hawk. He hadn't looked surprised. He looked interested, and interest in that moment felt a lot like intent. He wasn't reading anymore. The paperback lay forgotten, his posture transformed. Coiled, ready, his eyes locked on the crew moving the bag. I knew the truth instantly. He was the Federal Air Marshal. No uniform, no badge, nothing to mark him. They exist in plain sight, shadows in cheap jackets until the moment they are needed. And he was activated now. A silent weapon. His presence steadied me, but also confirmed the danger was real. Up front, Karen Lane still had her phone out, whispering like a tabloid correspondent. "The crew seems panicked," she said dramatically, angling her camera. "They're moving baggage around during a lightning storm. Utter incompetence. This airline has put us all in danger." The irony nearly strangled me. The only reason she was alive, the only reason any of us were alive, was because those incompetent flight attendants were fighting to keep control. Their professionalism was the thread holding this whole nightmare together. At the rear of the plane, I couldn't see the details, but I knew the drill. They would be isolating Sarah's tote in the LRBL, building a makeshift buffer around it with soft luggage and water-soaked blankets. A desperate defense, but better than nothing. Now the aircraft was a sealed capsule. Cockpit locked. Threat contained. Air marshal alert. Every piece in place. My role? Just another body strapped into 2A. My rank, my training, it meant nothing right now. The professionals had it in hand. My job was to stay quiet, stay observant, be a witness. I watched Karen, still spinning lies into her live stream. I watched the air marshal, still as stone, eyes never leaving the rear of the plane. I watched the flight attendants, moving with smiles that didn't reach their eyes, offering calm words to terrified passengers while swallowing their own fear. The storm battered us. The plane jolted, creaked, groaned. Lightning lit the cabin in staccato bursts. Outside was chaos. Inside was tense silence. We were an isolated world hurtling through a crucible. And I knew this wasn't random. The chaos was engineered. Someone wanted this plane on the ground here and now. The descent stretched into eternity. Every groan of the frame, every flash through the window felt like a countdown. Rain pounded the fuselage like war drums. Then a gap in the clouds, a fleeting glimpse. My city below, the glowing arteries of highways, the shimmer of downtown towers. Home. But it didn't feel like homecoming. Felt like flying straight into an ambush. My phone buzzed. Lena. Message after frantic message pouring in like static. Emergency HOA meeting is live. Developers here. He's saying the variance is a done deal. He just said Karen Lane is delayed, but on her way to cast the deciding vote. He said her flight was conveniently diverted here because of a minor medical issue. He's laughing, Evan. He thinks it's funny. The words burned. My anger went cold, sharp. The mask was off. They weren't even hiding it. The medical emergency was a prop. The diversion, a tool. This whole flight, every terrified passenger, every rattled bone, every drop of sweat, was just logistics. A private taxi service for Karen and her developer crony. I looked down through the storm toward the city where Lena and I had built our life. The quiet street we'd chosen, the backyard where we grilled with friends like Mike. The community we believed in. And these people, Karen, the man with the ring, were willing to gamble it all for money. For power. The landing gear dropped with a familiar thump. The flaps extended with a hydraulic whine. For a moment, those routine sounds were a bomb. Normalcy in the chaos. The pilot at the controls was good, damn good. Holding this aircraft steady through crosswinds that wanted to toss us aside. Runway lights broke through the downpour. Twin white lines stretching into darkness. A promise of ground beneath us. But my gut stayed knotted. Landing was only the end of one chapter. The threat was still on board. And the plan, damn it, their plan was still unfolding perfectly. Karen was minutes from stepping into her meeting as if she'd just survived some heroic ordeal. We hit the runway hard. Tires screeched, hydroplaned, then gripped. Engines roared into reverse. A bone-deep shove against our seats. And then, blessed deceleration. We were down. For now, safe. But we didn't taxi to the main terminal. Instead, we were guided to a remote gate. Vehicles already waiting in the rain. Police cruisers, fire engines, and ambulance. Their lights strobed across the wet tarmac, blue and red reflected in puddles. This wasn't routine. The ground crew knew. The authorities had been briefed. Engines spooled down. A different silence filled the cabin. Charged. Expectant. The fight in the air was over. The human battle was next. Karen gathered her things with a victorious smirk, convinced she'd pulled it off. She thought she had won. She had no idea the real storm hadn't even started. The jet bridge docked with a heavy thud. The captain's voice came over the PA, stripped of all warmth. All passengers remain seated with seatbelts fastened. I repeat, remain seated. No negotiation in his tone. But there's always one. A man in a slick suit leapt from the economy rose the moment the cabin door clicked open. Polished shoes. Flash of gold from his signet ring. The fixer. He pushed past the flight attendant at the door. Smooth words tumbling out. Sorry, connection to catch. Lies wrapped in adrenaline. He was making a break for it. He hadn't expected the trap to spring this fast. He thought chaos would cover his escape. He thought wrong. Seat 14C moved. The air marshal was already up, flowing forward with the precision of a predator. Not running, just moving with inevitability. His paperback abandoned, his voice low but steel-edged. Sir, return to your seat. I was right there in 2A, the scene unfolding barely 10 feet away. The fixer ignored him and bolted onto the jet bridge. His plan was obvious. Hit the emergency stairs, vanish into the wet darkness of the tarmac. Not on our watch. I unbuckled and slid into the aisle, blocking the cabin entrance. If he doubled back, he wasn't getting through me. Out on the bridge, the marshal barked his authority. Federal agent! Stop! The fixer spun, cornered. His hand shot inside his jacket. And in that instant, everything slowed. He pulled a knife. Not a big one, but thin, sharp, and vicious-looking. A tool made for slipping between ribs or across a throat. His eyes were wild, jittering with panic and desperation as he slashed it toward the air marshal. Stay back! He barked, his voice cracking. He didn't want to fight, he wanted space. A heartbeat of hesitation. A window to vanish. But he hadn't counted on me. I wasn't armed. I wasn't sworn. But I had 20 pounds of solid luggage in my hand. My rollerboard, packed tight, every corner hard as steel. In the confined space of the jet bridge, it was more than just baggage. It was a weapon. He lunged, trying to dart past. Instinct took over. I didn't swing wildly, that would have been sloppy, easy to counter. Instead, I shifted, shouldered into his path, and drove the hard edge of my bag straight into his wrist. The impact cracked like a snapped branch. His scream was sharp, cut short as the knife flew from his hand and clattered against the jet bridge floor. He stumbled, unbalanced, pain tearing across his face. That was all the air marshal needed. He was already moving, a precise blur of training and economy of motion. In an instant, he was on the fixer, pinning his arm, twisting him hard. At the same time, 2 airport police officers stormed up the jet bridge, their boots hammering the metal floor. The scuffle was short, brutal, and absolute. In seconds, the fixer was face-first against the corrugated wall, wrists cinched in steel. He thrashed and cursed, but he was done. Then he turned his head, spitting words back into the cabin. His gaze locked on Karen Lane, who stood frozen in the aisle, phone in hand, her mouth open like a caught liar mid-sentence. You! He shouted, voice ragged with betrayal. This was your plan. You set me up. Karen's smirk evaporated. Color drained from her face. The Queen of Spin looked like a rookie actor caught in the spotlight with no lines to read. Passengers were already on their feet, recording everything. Dozens of phones held high, capturing every word, every accusation. Whatever Karen thought her hero narrative had been, it was over. The fixer had just torn it to shreds in front of a captive audience. Dragged away in cuffs, still screaming threats, the fixer disappeared into the storm outside. The air marshal collected the knife with gloved precision, sealed it in an evidence bag, then met my eyes. His nod was quick, sharp, professional. No words exchanged, just recognition between 2 men who'd stepped in when it counted. The adrenaline was fading, but the real storm was only building. Federal agents boarded in waves, their presence quiet but commanding. One of them, a woman in a razor-sharp suit, eyes cutting like glass, introduced herself as Agent Miller. She listened, she asked, she noted every detail. I told her what I'd seen, what I'd heard, keeping it stripped down to fact. No theories, no opinions, just the truth. When she asked for my name and occupation, I hesitated for half a breath. My cover as just another passenger was gone. Evan Cross, I said, pilot, with this airline. Her expression didn't change, but her eyes softened a fraction. Things clicked into place for her. My composure, my instincts, the way I'd acted. "Thank you, Captain Cross," she said simply. Meanwhile, TSA agents in heavy bomb suits extracted Sarah's tote bag, locking it into a containment case and hauling it off the aircraft. The suspected threat was gone, but the investigation was far from over. Karen, desperate to reclaim her stage, turned her phone back toward her face. Her voice trembled as she spun lies into the camera. "It was a terrorist. A violent man attacked us. The crew failed to protect us. I feared for my life. It was pathetic, transparent. Agent Miller wasn't having it." She strode up to Karen, calm but unyielding. "Ma'am, turn off the phone. This is a federal investigation. That device is evidence." Karen puffed up, her voice brittle with defiance. "I have a right to document. Now." Miller's tone dropped like a gavel. "Unbreakable." Karen's shoulders crumpled. She fumbled with her phone and the stream went dark. Moments later, another agent approached Miller with an update. "I caught every word. A high-power RF jammer," he reported. "Short-range disruption. Not flight controls, but perfect for sowing confusion in storm conditions. Passenger devices, handheld radios, GPS receivers, scrambled. Exactly what we found in the rear cabin." Miller's eyes flicked toward Karen. "And the purchase?" she asked. The agent nodded grimly. "Traced it. Corporate card. Oak Valley Holdings." My stomach turned to ice. Oak Valley, the developer. The same company fighting to gut our neighborhood. The agent wasn't finished. "Mailing address is AP. Box. Same one tied to the Cedar Creek Homeowners Association." The noose tightened. The picture was crystal clear now. The fake medical diversion, the planted threat, the RF jammer, it wasn't about terror. It was about control. A forced landing at the nearest convenient airport, just in time for Karen Lane to cast her deciding vote at a homeowners meeting. All of this, all the fear, all the chaos, had been nothing but a power play. A rigged taxi ride with 200 souls strapped in as collateral. Agent Miller turned her gaze back to Karen. Silent, deadly. Karen shrank beneath it. And then my phone buzzed. "Lena." Again. Only this time it wasn't just frantic texts. It was files, screenshots, documents, an entire stream of digital evidence pouring in like artillery. While I'd been fighting the battle in the air, she'd been waging war on the ground. She had transformed from a concerned wife into a world-class investigator. The first file Lena sent nearly took my breath away. A still frame from my neighbor Mike's door camera, timestamped 7 a.m. that morning. It showed Karen Lane's driveway. Standing beside her was the fixer, the man with the signet ring, handing her a thick envelope. Proof of collusion, hours before the flight ever left the ground. The next file was worse. A catering invoice, lobster tails, champagne, linen service. A victory party, booked for 10 p.m. that night at the developer's headquarters. Paid in full 2 days earlier. The client wasn't the developer. It was the Cedar Creek HOA. Our dues, the money we paid to mow our lawns, fix our sidewalks, keep the pool open, had been siphoned to bankroll a celebration of our own defeat. It wasn't just corruption. It was theft. And then came the final nail. A screenshot from the HOA's livestream chat. Before the chaos on the plane had even begun, one of Karen's allies had typed, "Don't worry. Karen has a plan. She'll make it no matter what. The vote will happen tonight." For knowledge, intent, the smoking gun. I didn't hesitate. I crossed to Agent Miller, who had just finished a call. "You'll want to see this," I told her, handing over my phone. Her face shifted as she scrolled. First curious, then grim. She zoomed in on the fixer's ring, studied the catering receipt, lingered on the chat message. Finally, she handed my phone back. "Well," she said quietly, "that ties it," with a bow. Her eyes cut toward Karen, who was hunched in her seat, trying to shrink into invisibility. But there was no hiding now. The airline's head of station security boarded, a tall man in a dark suit with the bearing of a hanging judge. Miller conferred with him briefly. He nodded, keyed his radio, then turned to face Karen. "Karen Lane," he said, voice echoing through the hushed cabin. "On behalf of this airline, you are hereby banned from flying with us for life. We are referring this matter to the FAA, TSA, and Department of Justice." The gasp that rippled through the cabin was almost physical. A lifetime ban was the airline's death sentence. Karen went chalk white, and then Agent Miller delivered the final blow. She strode forward with 2 uniformed officers. Her voice was crisp, cold, and absolute. "Karen Lane, you are under arrest for conspiracy to interfere with the duties of a flight crew, endangering the safety of an aircraft, and other federal offenses. You have the right to remain silent." The handcuffs snapped shut. The sound rang louder than the storm outside. The queen of the HOA, the tyrant of Cedar Creek, the woman who'd terrorized neighbors over mailbox paint, was led off the plane in chains, phones recording from every angle. Her empire crumbled in real time, live-streamed to the world. And when she was gone, the cabin erupted in applause. The fixer was in custody. Karen was in custody. Their scheme was exposed. But the battle for Cedar Creek wasn't finished. Not yet. By the time I was released from giving statements in a sterile lounge, it was nearly midnight. Exhausted, I stepped outside into the rain-washed night, and there she was, Lena, waiting at the curb. I dropped my bags and pulled her into my arms. "You were incredible," I murmured. She smiled up at me, tired but fierce. "No, we were." We drove home in silence, the adrenaline drained, replaced by bone-deep relief. But as we turned down our street, the clubhouse lights still burned. The emergency HOA meeting was still in session. "Let's finish this," Lena said. Inside, chaos reigned. The developer had fled, Karen's allies were floundering, and the room was packed with neighbors. Neighbors who had seen the news, the videos, the truth. Mike, the mild accountant Karen once fined over a garden gnome, stood. His voice carried like a gavel. "I move that we remove Karen Lane as president of the Cedar Creek HOA, effective immediately under the bylaws." A second came instantly. The vote was unanimous. Cheers shook the room. Karen was gone. Her grip shattered in a single night. Mike was elected interim president. His first act, scheduling a fair vote on the zoning variance, with mailed ballots to every household. A month later, the variance was crushed 98-2. The developer folded under lawsuits and indictments. The fixer flipped, testifying against Karen and her cronies. She was sentenced to 10 years in federal prison. Cedar Creek was free. Weeks later, I stood on my deck, flipping burgers as the sun set in streaks of gold and purple. Kids' laughter drifted down the street. A lawnmower hummed. Peace had returned, sweeter than before. Lena handed me a glass of iced tea and slid her arm around my waist. We stood quietly, watching the sky. "You never told me what you did on that jet bridge," she said softly. I flipped a burger, listening to it sizzle. "I just solved a problem, and that was the truth. I hadn't been a hero, just a man protecting his home, his people, his life. Sometimes that meant listening for the wrong kind of click. Sometimes it meant standing your ground. And sometimes it meant knowing when to trust the person watching your back. How far will a man go to defend his own? As far as he has to. No further. No less.